This is the fourth video in the AutoCAD ABCs, all about layers, layer properties, and how to set up layers in your drawings. This is a drawing file where I have all kinds of layers set up. It's an architectural drawing with floor plans stacked up on floor plans, and it looks messy, but it's actually very well organized. To take a look at the layers of this drawing that are controlling most of how this drawing is organized, I'm going to come to the layer area of my ribbon. I can open up the list of layers right here, and you can see the layers have different colors and different names, and there are lots of different settings that you can take advantage of. We'll talk about each of those. To take a further look at all the different layers and all of their individual characteristics, I'm going to open up the layer properties. This gives me access to the layer manager. You can see all the layers by name are listed here. There are some different settings, different characteristics for each one. These layers are set up very specifically by name. It is very important in your drawings to name layers correctly, because as you'll learn, each type of line that you draw will have different characteristics based on what it needs to represent graphically. And those are going to be reflected in the names. The heavier lines in this drawing are for the walls. The lighter lines, for example, might be for notes or details. If I want to isolate groups of layers, another good reason to name them accordingly, this is a great example here, because you can see I have all the layers for the first floor, everything that's part of that floor plan, starting off with this prefix, FL1. So these are the layers that deal with the first floor. Then I've got layers for the second floor, FL2. I've got layers for the foundation. In terms of how the drawing is completed, you can see that I have lots of things stacked up on top of each other, and this is a great way to keep the drawing organized and also to be able to make sure that really important items of this plan are stacking up, are lining up. Do the chimneys line up? Do the walls line up, etc.? And if I can isolate the layers and then work with one area at a time, I can make sure that not only does everything line up, but then I can work specifically with one place at a time. Let me go back into my layer properties and show you what I mean. So one of the things that you can do with a list of layers, let's say I want to work with just the first floor. I'm going to isolate all the other floors by clicking to highlight the first layer with the FL2 extension or prefix. I'm going to hold down on my shift key and click on FRR. Those are framing layers. You can see by doing that, holding the shift key down and then clicking, all of these layers are selected. I'm going to now turn them off. See that this particular column allows you to turn layers on and off. When I come back to my drawing now, you can see that I have isolated just the first floor, and my drawing is a lot easier to work with, but I did that very efficiently. I'll go back into my layer properties one more time. If I take a look at all the layers that I've now turned off, you can see what's happened to those icons. In the column for on or off, I've got a light bulb. If the layer is on, you can see that it's got a lighter yellow color. If it's off, it's gray. One other option to isolate layers in terms of whether or not they're visible in the drawing editor is being able to freeze or thaw them. And the reason why you have two options here, although they appear to perform the same function, when a layer is off, you can actually still edit things on that layer in certain circumstances. When you freeze a layer, I'm going to freeze FL2 to show you the difference in that icon. It turns from a sun into a little snowflake. When you freeze a layer, you've essentially not just turned off that layer, but you've also locked it. You can't edit anything on that layer. The third option that you have is to lock that layer, which keeps everything on that layer visible, but does not allow you to do any editing. Anything on a layer that is locked you won't be able to change it until you go ahead and unlock that layer. So these are fairly common names for an architectural set of layers. Close my layer manager and open up my other tab. This is a mechanical drawing. If I open up my layer properties so we can take a look at those, you'll see the layer names are different. Layer names are specific to the industry, so if you're interested in learning more about layer naming convention, check out the information in the Graphic Standards Manual. There you'll find a really good list of different kinds of layers commonly used in mechanical and architectural drawings. You'll notice mechanical layer names typically are 3-letter abbreviations. BOR for border, CEN for center, DIM for dimension, and so on. I'm going to show you how to create a new set of layers in a brand new drawing you've opened from scratch, and we're going to use these mechanical naming conventions and also the settings here that you're seeing in the line type category and the line weight category. Graphically, when you draw items on specific layers, they need to have certain characteristics. The line type or the pattern of the layer gives you very specific information about that particular item. And the line weight, is it a thin line, is it a thick line, also gives you very specific information. For example, the OBJ layer, which is the abbreviation for the object edge, the objects of your drawing. Those are solid lines, and in terms of line types, that means the continuous pattern is the setting you need for that. But they're also very heavy lines, thick line weight. You'll use 0.50 for your object layer for all of your drawings. If you've had a chance to read through the graphic standards area on things like hidden lines and center lines and what those represent, it will make sense that your HID or your hidden layer has a hidden line type, and your CEN or your center layer has a center line type. The other thing I want to mention before we set up a new group of layers has to do with how those layers work when you're ready to plot your drawing. You notice one of the columns here in your layer manager has to do with whether or not anything on that layer will plot or not. The little plotter icon, when it looks like a little printer with no red circle with a line through it, everything on that layer will set to plot. This last layer that we'll use to create our viewports, hence the VP abbreviation, that layer should not plot. You don't want to see those edges in your final drawings when you print them, so we're going to set that layer to not plot. Okay, I'm going to close my layer manager here, and I'm going to start a new drawing from scratch. I'm going to open with no template Imperial. The only layer that you have by default in a drawing file when you first open it is the 0 layer. And it does have a purpose. It's meant for creating blocks. It's something we'll talk about later on. You can't delete it. I would leave it as the default settings. We're going to go into the layer properties. The other way to access those is through the layer command. LA is the alias. That will also open up your layer manager. So here you can see in this file I have no layers yet created. There are some buttons over here I want to make sure you're aware of. First, to create a new layer, we'll use the button on the left. You can create a new layer that's automatically frozen in viewports, so be careful when you're making new layers as you're first getting used to setting up drawings in AutoCAD, that you don't click this one by mistake. If you do though, and you make a layer you didn't intend to keep, you can delete a layer as long as it hasn't been used for anything. And then when you're ready and you have your layers set up, the layer that you set current is the layer that you'll draw with. Okay? So we'll set up a new set of layers. I'm going to click on the new layer button. I'm going to make sure my caps lock is on because I can make all of these layers in all caps. Mechanical abbreviation for text is all capitals, so that's fine. Keeps things easier. We'll make the object layer first, OBJ. And you can see now I've got 2 layers and lots of different options. Actually, there's several layers I'd like to create, and I'm going to type all the names first. So if I hit the New Layer button, I also want a hidden layer. If you pause here for just a moment before you press Enter and instead press the comma key, that will give you another new layer to enter a new name. Center, C-E-N, comma. I'd also like a text layer, T-X-T, comma. A dim layer for dimensions. I'm going to make a phantom layer, P-H-A, and a viewport layer. Okay. Now, each of these is out of order alphabetically, and if you prefer to work with them that way, maybe if you're entering things from an alphabetized list, there are two ways to do that. I can refresh here, and that will order things alphabetically. I can also click on any of the titles of my columns and reorganize things that way. Okay. I don't need to worry about freezing or locking or turning anything off at this point. I want to leave all of those just as they are. The first thing I want to think about changing is the color. One way to keep yourself organized and take best advantage of these layers is to set each layer with its own unique color, and that way you can very quickly tell at a glance what items are on which layer. If I click on the color swatch on the center layer, the Select a Color tablet opens up. I can choose from any of these 256 colors. I can enter the name of the color here or even the number. If you hover over any of these, you'll see that the index color number appears. I'm going to make my center layer magenta. Make my dimensions orange. Hidden, I'm going to make cyan. Object I'm going to leave as white. Phantom, I'm going to make sort of a purple color. Text, I'm going to make green. And that viewport layer, remember, we're going to make that non-plot. I'm going to set that now by just clicking on that plotter icon. It really doesn't matter what color to make that, but I do want it to be different from anything else I might be working with. So I'm going to make that, say this brighter orange color. Now my colors are set. The next thing I need to change are my line types. We already know that the center layer needs a center line type. Hidden will need a hidden line type. Phantom has its own line type. Everything else will stay continuous. So, on a layer that has a different pattern, I'm going to click on the word continuous, and the option to load line types appears in the Select a Line Type box. I'm going to look first for a center line type. I'm going to choose Center 2. This will work really well with a smaller object. So you notice that I've got different options for center. Center by itself has this pattern. Center 2 is half of that scale. Center times 2, or x2, is twice that scale. For smaller objects, the half scale line types work very well. I'm going to choose that from the list and hit OK. Now I have a center line type to select and change the line type of that layer. And click on Hidden and then Continuous. Load, let's see, I also have a phantom line type to load, so I'm going to load those both at the same time. Looking for Hidden 2. So I'm going to select that and hold my Control key down, and then look for Phantom 2. And that will allow me to choose both of these line types to load. Now I just need to choose the proper line type for the line that I'm on, Hidden. Okay. And then on Phantom, I've already got my Phantom line type loaded. I just need to select it. The default line weight is a thin line. It's 0.25, but there's one layer here specifically that needs to be a heavy line weight of 0.5. So on the object layer, if I choose where it says default under line weight, I'm going to go ahead and choose 0.5 from the list. Everything else at this point can stay the default, but that is very easy to change. As you see, click on default, and then you have all kinds of line weights to choose from that are preset and ready to select. We've got the one layer already set to non-plot, so our layers are complete. Now a quick demonstration of how these look. I'm going to set my object layer current. Click on the layer, click on set current. I can also double click on that layer. That green check tells me that the next object that I draw will be on the object layer. I'm going to close my layer properties and draw a rectangle. And zoom in on that a little bit. I'm going to draw a circle inside of that rectangle. Now those should both be heavy line weights, but I don't have that line weight appearing. There's a toggle I can turn on or off, show hide line weights. When I do that, you'll see in the drawing editor especially that those heavy line weights are even a bit exaggerated. I'm going to change to a different layer now. I come over to my list of layers in my ribbon and switch to the center layer. I want to place a center mark on that circle. First thing I'm going to do with the dim send command is check actually and change the value that will affect how the center marks appear for an object that will end up printing at full size or a 1-to-1 scale. We're going to use negative to get extension lines, which you'll see in a moment. 0.0625. DCE will allow me to place that center mark on the circle. So that setting gives us extension lines, little crosshairs, but that center layer is a light line weight. So if I turn back on my show hide line weight, you'll see that the white object edges look thick or heavy, and the center lines still look thin. Leave that on. I'm going to draw a quick line with the hidden layer. And you'll see that hidden layer pattern appears, the hidden line type, also a thin layer, a thin line. Switch now to my phantom lines. And there you can see the phantom line type, again another thin line weight. For more information on CAD standards for layer properties, line types, line weights, and layer names, please refer to the Graphic Standards Manual.